Welcome everyone to your first webcast. Today we're going to be talking about the biological levels of organization. And we will be discussing these levels all through the year, and so it's kind of important that you understand which level we are discussing at any given point in time. And you will be seeing life's properties emerging out of many of these as we go through. We're going to be starting, there's going to be 16 of them, so please take notes. You'll want to write down the level, give a definition, and one example of each. We'll start with the very largest, which is the biosphere, and we're going to be going way on down to atoms and then even subatomic particles. In this beginning image, you can see that there are 6 of them, going from biosphere on down to the individual organism at the bottom left. But what we'll be doing is many more than just these 6. We're going to be putting some in between and go down even smaller. But this is the general principle. So you have to imagine that you're zooming in, getting tinier and tinier, like you have a special magic microscope. All right, so we're starting off with the biosphere, which is the 10-mile thick layer surrounding the Earth that harbors all life. 10 miles might seem very thick, but it's actually quite thin when you put it in perspective with the 8,000-mile diameter of the Earth. It would be like a thin sheet of paper that harbors all life, and this is the only place in the universe that we even know has life for a fact. The next, if we were to zoom in from there, we have the biomes, and this is only on the land at this point. We're talking about large geographical areas, and they are distinguished by vegetation, animal life, and climate. Even closer, we've got the ecosystem, which is a lot like a biome, but it's smaller. And with an ecosystem, you're talking about both the living, which is the biotic, and the non-living, which is the abiotic portions of the ecosystem. So it's going to include all the organisms and all of the soil, water, and weather that make up that area. If we look a little closer at only just the living things, then we're talking about a community. So the community is made up of all the populations, all the organisms that all live together in that ecosystem. So in this photo, we have a coral reef, and you've got corals, and you've got tube worms, and sea stars, and fish, and all kinds of other living things that all interact with each other in complex food webs. And if we were to zoom in from there, we might be looking at just one kind of organism, but a group of them. And that what we call a population, which is a group of freely interacting and breeding individuals of the same species that live in the same ecosystem. And there's 5 examples for you to choose from there. But they have to live in the same place. They have to all be the same kind, and they all have to live in the same place. Then we've got organisms, and that's our favorite one because that's what we are. And you can see that we've got that could include not just animals, but it's going to include plants, and it's going to include microbes and mushrooms and anything else that's made up of cells, bacteria. So an organism is a complete and entire living thing, and they will be displaying all the characteristics of life that we will be going into later in a different webcast. Next level, the complex organisms are made up of organ systems. And these are a group of organs that work together, and they all perform a major function. So it's our nervous system that allows us to interact with our environment. It's our digestive system that allows us to get nutrients out of the foods that we eat. Right? So those are organ systems. Now, if we were to take just one piece of an organ system, then we would be at the level of the organ, which an organ is defined as a specialized structure that has specific functions, and they are made up of different tissues, which that'll be the next thing we look at. So you can see that when we say look at the heart there, you can see that it's not all one kind of cell. It's different groups of cells, different tissues that make up one structure that does one thing. So like the heart pumps our blood, right? The kidney filters the waste out of our blood. The lungs allow us to do gas exchange, oxygen and carbon dioxide, right? Tissues are distinct types of cells with a common structure and function. So they're a group of cells that are all the exact same type. These are just 4 types that are shown here. But an organ is made up of groups of tissues, right? And so you don't call a single cell a tissue. You call a tissue is a group of cells that are all the exact same type and they all do a specific thing. And then we get to the level of the cell. And the cell is a very important level. It's considered the basic structural and functional unit of life. They do basically everything that an organism does. They take in food, they respond to their environment, they excrete waste, they metabolize, they create proteins and various other molecules. And so here's these are 4 examples of cells for you. Then in closer, we can see that each cell is made up of different parts. They're called organelles. And just like our organ systems are made up of organs, cells are made up of tinier structures that are called organelles. And now these are tiny, right? I mean, you can barely see a cell with the naked eye. So organelles you certainly can't see with the naked eye. And so these are going to include things like the mitochondria and the Golgi apparatus and the endoplasmic reticulum. And each of those structures, they do something different for the cell. If we look any closer at a single one of those organelles, we'll see that they are made up of different large molecular assemblies. And so, for example, the plasma membrane that surrounds the mitochondria, the nucleus, the endoplasmic reticulum, it's made up of this phospholipid bilayer that is embedded with proteins. Chromosomes that are found in the nucleus are basically made up of DNA that are wrapped around big proteins called histone proteins. And ribosomes, which are around the endoplasmic reticulum there, the rough ER, those are little factories for making proteins, and there's like hundreds and thousands of them in each cell. Smaller than that, if we were to zoom in those large molecular assemblies, we'd see that they are made up of large organic molecules, and there are basically 4 classes. 4 classes, and we call them macromolecules because they are so large. Most of them are polymers also, meaning they're made up of, they're large molecules that are made up of monomers or repeating subunits. And so nucleic acids is one category, like DNA, proteins like enzymes, carbohydrates such as cellulose, and lipids such as fats and oils. Those are the 4 main categories of macromolecules. And if you look even smaller, the subunits that make those up, which are monomers for the most part, are going to be your nucleotides, are made up of they make up DNA, amino acids make up proteins, glucose makes up starch, and the fatty acids make up lipids. And so these are the little like beads on a chain that make up the larger molecule. So like if a necklace is a polymer, the pearls would be like the monomer. And then smaller than that, we've got the atom, smallest unit of matter, not the smallest unit of life, but the smallest unit of matter that have the same properties as the element. And so in biology, there's only 5 really important elements that you need to learn about, and kind of listed in order of importance there. Carbon is at the top, and then hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and sulfur. And to remember those, there's a little acronym there for you, CHONS, C-H-O-N-S, a mnemonic device for you. If you remember CHONS, the great CHONS, that's the 5 biologically important elements. And tinier than that, we come to this last but not least is the subatomic particles, which are your protons, neutrons, and electrons. And of course, we could go even smaller than that, but we're going to stop it right there. And I hope you've enjoyed this webcast and that you learned a lot. Bye.